Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time it is a review of the 2018 horror film Mandy. And I'm going to say this right here and right now, folks. I loved this movie. I thought this film was magnificent. I personally feel that Mandy is a modern day masterpiece. And I'm not hyping it up or anything because this is a film I was leery of from the beginning. I liked the trailer. It looked interesting to me. I love the visual style, but a lot of films in this genre, in the horror genre, that are independent films, especially the independent films, they have been letting me down a lot lately. They've been critically acclaimed, and then I go and see them, and then I'm not impressed, or they're disappointing. And Mandy was not anything like that for me. It exceeded my expectations and then some. I've not seen a film that has had me this floored by its overall high quality in a long time. I'm kicking myself that I didn't get the opportunity to see this in the theater. And it's one of those films that it really did deserve a wider release, but even if it did get a wide release in today's day and age, it wouldn't have done that well. And that's what sucks. You have a film like Mandy that is marvelous, that is visually stunning, that is impressive on multiple different levels of filmmaking, and actually is somewhat unique and provides an experience that is so different from the norm. And barely anybody got the chance to see it. It doesn't do that. Even if it did get released in theaters, it wouldn't have done that well because it isn't a sequel. It isn't The Familiar. It isn't a comic book film. It isn't a reboot. It isn't a remake. It isn't the same shit that we've seen over and over again. It's not The Familiar. It's more of the unknown and the different and the out there and the surreal. And that's not popular in the mainstream. As much as it sucks to admit it, it's true. But that still doesn't take anything away from what the film did, what Panos Cosmatos managed to accomplish, as well as the rest of the cast and crew. And it's one of those films that, despite the fact that it probably won't get mainstream appeal, it is destined to be a cult classic. Now, Mandy is a 2018 film that's listed as an action horror movie, and there are some action elements to this, but I would say it's horror first, action second, because it's more of a slow burn film. It takes a bit to get going, and I know some critics have said that it takes too long. I respectfully disagree. I thought it was nearly perfectly paced for me personally, because the way that it's structured is like a old school 70s horror pulp novel, complete with even chapter titles. So I didn't really mind the slow build. In fact, I liked it because it gave me more time to get to know the characters, and it made the climax all the more effective because it was actually a slow burn that was worth the wait. It wasn't one of those slow burns that the fire never gets lit, or it gets lit and then goes out before the end of the movie. No, it gets lit and then it ignites like a powder keg and turns into a raging inferno by the end of the movie. The last 30-40 minutes of the film is just pure cocaine fueled cage rage, and it is a sight to behold. And so it's not like the film doesn't build up to anything. Oh, it definitely does. It builds up to a climax that's full of blood and cocaine and super LSD and fucking chainsaw dueling. So and axes and head crushing. It's absolutely insane. And the fact that the film took its time building up to that moment, to me personally, makes that climax so much more worth it and so much more powerful and effective and memorable because they didn't blow their wad early in the film. They saved the best for last, and I appreciate that a lot. Now, the film was directed by Panos Cosmatos, who is the son of the late George P. Cosmatos, who directed films like Of Unknown Origin, Cobra, Tombstone, Leviathan, and George P. Cosmatos is a great director in his own right, but Panos is definitely keeping his name alive, keeping the family legacy alive, because his direction in this is some of the best I've seen in a while from the independent film genre, and definitely when it comes to direction that I've seen in a film this year. I would honestly even say it's the best direction I've seen from a film in 2018. It was that spectacular. The way that he used the light, the red and the blue lighting and all these other different colors, he did it to perfection. It was just a visual watercolor. It was just absolutely stunning. There was even a scene in the film where he used a cross dissolve of Andrea Riseborough's face with the face of the actor who's playing Jeremiah Sand, the main villain, Linus Roache, and it's a cross dissolve, which was just incredibly unsettling because it starts out with Linus Roache just staring straight into the camera and going through this just really eerie speech, and then you have this cross dissolve that is seamless with the face of Andrea Riseborough, and it is just so. I mean, Andrea Riseborough. There's no N in her name. I apologize. But Andrea Riseborough, or Risborough, and it's such a seamless transition. It's so unsettling and creepy and strange, and there's multiple moments like that throughout the film. He also gets the utmost out of his actors. Linus Roache, who just plays this really roach-like villain who you want to squash. He's such a despicable piece of shit. He's a horrible person, and I like the fact that this film has villains that are just over the top evil, because that in a lot of ways is some of the most effective villains in films like this. The ones that are just so evil and so dastardly that their evilness just permeates off the screen. And Linus Roache's character Jeremiah Sand was definitely one of those villains, as was Ned Dennehy and Richard Brake and Olwen Fouéré. And not only did this film have very effective villains, it also had very effective main characters and protagonists. Nicolas Cage as Red Miller is a character that Nicolas Cage was born to play. He does a absolutely phenomenal job here. Easily one of the best acting performances he's done in a long time. To me personally, this film proves that Nicolas Cage is a damn good actor when he's reined in, when he has a director who can rein him in, who can get him to take things seriously when they need to be taken seriously, and then let him off the leash for when things need to go off the rails. And that's another reason why Panos Cosmatos' direction is so great. It's so amazing, because he managed to do the near impossible here and get a serious performance out of Nick Cage when there needed to be one, like when it's starting out and you're just getting to know the character and his wife Mandy, played by Andrea Riseborough. And then when things get really serious and really emotional, when he's tied up and has to watch his wife get burned to death, it's some really powerful, absolutely phenomenal acting by Nicolas Cage, where he's tied up and he's helpless, he can't do anything, and your heart goes out to him, and that moment would not be as powerful if it wasn't for Nick Cage's sincere, legitimately great acting in that scene. And then after that, in a way that only Cage can do, he has a scene in the bathroom where he's chugging alcohol, he's chugging a whole bottle of vodka while wearing a tiger shirt in his tidy whities, and he's doing his typical gamut of emotions. that only Cage can provide. And instead of it being laughable or silly, it actually comes across as sincere when he's going back and forth between these different emotions. He's drinking the alcohol and he's laughing and then he's screaming and then he's crying. He's going through all these different emotions which most people go through in moments of grief. And especially after something as crazy as what he went through. And then when Cage is unleashed in the end and he's hopped up on cocaine and super LSD, Nick Cage's unhinged attitude and performance style is perfect. And I give so much props to Panos Cosmatos for managing to encapsulate the Cage rage. That's difficult to do, and he makes it look easy. And Andrea Riseborough, she's also equally as effective here as Mandy. She's absolutely haunting in this role. She doesn't have that much dialogue, but the way that the sequences with her were shot were really memorable in a very haunting and stunning way. How it managed to just really capture the pain and the, in a way, kind of the, I'm trying to think of the right word. And definitely pain is the right word to put it, because she definitely plays a character who's been through a lot in her life. And so Panos Cosmatos' direction really captures the mysterious elements of her, whether it's her appearance or her different character traits. And she doesn't have that many scenes or that many lines of dialogue, but she still has a lot of impact. She still delivers a lot when it comes to what you take away from the film because of how solid her performance is. There's a really great scene where she's talking to Nicolas Cage's character Red, and they're in bed, and she's telling him this story about what her dad used to do with starlings when she was a kid. And it was a really well performed and well acted monologue, and it really did take you deeper into this character, and you felt for her, and you wanted her to try to get her life on track and have a really happy life with Red, and then it's all taken away in a flash. And so yeah, she is top of the line, top notch, and Panos is a big reason why too, because he brings the best out of his actors. And one other actor I definitely want to mention before I go on any further with my review of this film is Bill Duke. Bill Duke is a phenomenal actor. He's amazing. He is an actor that does not get enough credit for how great he is. When you want a intense performance, when you want a character to deliver intensity to the utmost level, Bill Duke should be one of the first people to come to mind. And his performance in this film as Carruthers, a friend of Red Miller's and a personal armory of Red's, is a prime example of that. He has one scene in this film, and in that one scene, his line delivery is so powerful, it is so chilling, and it is so intense that it leaves a immense impact. And that's because Bill Duke is a amazingly talented, terrific actor who deserves more film roles, deserves more praise, and a role like this where he's given so little but delivers so much is a prime example of how underrated and overlooked of a performer and an actor Bill Duke is. We should appreciate people like Bill Duke, and we should also appreciate people like Nicolas Cage, because Nicolas Cage is a unique performance actor. Yes, there are moments where he's just over the top and his acting is bad, but there's other moments where in a film like this, his acting is unique. His take on his characters are different, and it adds to the film and to the entertainment and it doesn't detract from it. It's in a surreal way. He's like this generation's Klaus Kinski. That's honestly a great way to put it. It really is. So we should appreciate Cage. We should appreciate not only the Cage rage and Nicolas Cage's manic moments, but we should also appreciate the moments where he's sincere and delivers some really powerful and effective emotions and plays characters that are captivating in real ways. It doesn't seem like he's just some outer space alien uh, who's just figuring out how emotions work. Um, I've always thought Cage had the capability to be a great actor. I mean, look at Leaving Las Vegas. He won an Oscar for that film for a reason. And in other films like Bringing Out the Dead and so on and so forth. And I think Cage's status as just a meme, I think should end after this movie. I really think that people should be looking at Cage as a good actor in his own right. When he's on, and he's just as good as the best actor in Hollywood. And he's definitely on in Mandy. Panos Cosmatos also did a really solid job with the script, along with Aaron Stewart on. This screenplay has enough vagueness to it and leaves enough to the imagination that it really works. And it's a very simple plot. In a lot of ways, it's just a down and dirty revenge flick with a horror, sci-fi, fantasy bent to it. And I really like that. And it's satisfying. It's extremely satisfying and entertaining. And I appreciate the fact that it's not spoon feeding everything to you. You don't necessarily know what's going on with the Children of the Stars cult. You don't know if they're aliens or if they've got demonic spirits inside of them. It's not really explained, and I'm fine with that. I think that's fine. It adds to the film. It lets your imagination run wild and try to come up with your own conclusions. Were they actually possessed by demons or space aliens, or were they just hopped up on super doses of LSD? Who knows? The film, leaves it up to your imagination and lets you try to decide. And I don't mind that. I sometimes I feel that films today explain shit way too much when they should just leave it a little bit more vague and leave it up to determination and leave it up to interpretation. And I felt that the script definitely did do that. And it also made this cult even more eerie and mysterious. It's kind of like what happened with Halloween. Like, we didn't need the explanation for why Michael Myers all of a sudden snapped and decided to kill his sister. We didn't need that. The fact that it was unknown and mysterious, that was enough. And that was scary. That was terrifying. The unknown is scarier than the known. And not knowing what this cult is or what their powers are or whether or not they actually have alien artifacts or alien insects or some shit actually helped the film. It didn't detract from it at all in my eyes. Even with the Black Skull's biker gang, which initially looks like shit straight out of Hellraiser, and it still does throughout the entire movie. But when you find out that they're not demons from hell and they're just regular humans who are so hopped up and hooked on this super LSD that they become inhuman monsters, that's a pretty inspired concept. And that's just about as terrifying to me as demons from hell. Because it's hard to imagine that the human mind could get that corrupted and that addicted to drugs, and their mind would get that fucked up that they would be drinking blood and dressing up like the Hellraiser gang, the Hellraiser biker gang, the biker gang from hell, and going around killing people and doing it so they can get more drugs. I mean, it's one of those things that's like, it's twisted, but I could totally see it. I could totally see some fucked up group taking advantage of drug addicts and turning them into assassins. The script also does a really effective and intriguing job with other elements of the film, especially with its structure. Like I mentioned earlier, it's set up a lot like a 70s pulp horror novel, which makes sense because one of the main characters, Mandy, she's reading one of those novels throughout the film. So, in my opinion, I interpret this film like this. It's like one of those novels. It takes place in a fantasy land. Yes, it takes place in 1983, but it's actually not really taking place 100% in reality. And it makes sense when you see the end, where Nicolas Cage is driving in a car and he's driving away, and there's this outer space landscape in the background. There's different moons and planets and stuff, as if he was no longer on Earth. And that makes perfect sense when you look at it from the perspective that this is like an adaptation of one of those novels that Mandy loved to read and was reading throughout the film. And I think that's really inspired. I think that's really creative, and I love it. I do. There's so many creative things about this, from the cinematography, which is absolutely gorgeous. Uh, Benjamin Loeb and Panos Cosmatos work together and in ways that are just astonishing. Because there's, like I'm not kidding when I mean there are shots in this film that you could screenshot and print off and put in a frame and put in an art gallery. It's true. There's a particular shot where Nicolas Cage's character, I think he's on a lake, and I think he's like paddling around on a canoe, and the way that the water is shot is just absolutely gorgeous. It's beautiful. And then there's other shots throughout the film that are equally as beautiful and stunning, with the use of the lighting and so on and so forth. And when it needs to be scary, it delivers. There's a lot of very unnerving moments with the cult leaders and things like that. And when it needs to be a crowd pleaser, it's one of the best that I've seen this year. Nicolas Cage is smashing heads, fucking people up with chainsaws and an axe that he built with his bare hands and made out of steel that he smelted himself. There's even a scene in the film where he kills one of the biker gang members, and then he snorts some of his cocaine. And it's like this film is self-aware. It knows that the audience is expecting Cage to have a rage. They want the Cage rage, and they get it, and then some. And it's supremely satisfying. And Cage did a good job with the physical stuff too, with the choreography, with the axe, and with the chainsaw duel, and the practical effects when they are there are also impressive. It's a low budget film. The film didn't cost that much to make. I believe it only cost, I don't even know exactly what the budget is, but I do know that it made like 1.1 million so far in profit, and I hope it makes a lot more than that on home video, because it definitely deserves it in my eyes. I doubt it costs that much to make, especially compared to some of these other bigger budgeted blockbuster films. And it, unlike those movies, it gives you the practical gore. You get a practical head crush at the end, complete with eyes popping out and blood pouring out. You have a chainsaw duel where people are getting slashed with a chainsaw, and it's not CGI blood. There's no CGI. There's not a single drop of CGI blood in this entire movie. It's done old school and done the best way possible, in the most visceral and realistic way possible, and the way that it should be done, period. Corn syrup and food coloring. It's not that hard to do. It's not that expensive. It isn't something that I don't understand why a lot of Hollywood films, especially horror films, have resorted to CGI blood. It's lazy, and that's the only explanation I can come up with. They want to do it because it's easier to do. Well, you know what? It's faker than fuck, and it's obvious every single time, and it hurts every scene that it's in. If you want to have a visceral moment in your horror film, you better have real fake blood. I don't understand, like, real fake blood seems like an oxymoron, but in this case it's actually it's a real thing. And I don't like the Evil Dead remake, but I have to give that film a lot of props and a lot of credit for doing everything with as much practical effects and practical blood as possible. And Mandy does that as well, and it makes all these sequences of carnage all the more satisfying and all the more effective. And I'm trying to think of what else I could say about the film. I know it's like 120 something minutes, but for me personally, it went by at a good pace because it was just enough of character development. And then it goes into the sequence uh, where Jeremiah wants Mandy and breaks into Red's home with the help of the Black Skull biker gang. And even in the moment like that, the film is very stylish and chooses some really visually impressive direction because it starts showing the light just flashing on and off in a strobe light effect, which emphasizes the intensity and uh, the horrificness of that particular moment. Just woke up in the dead of the night, and here are these nightmarish figures who are knocking you out and taking your wife to who knows where. You don't know where. And then you wake up and you're tied to a post with barbed wire, and you have barbed wire in your mouth, and you have to watch these sick fucks take your wife, string her up in a bag, and then light her on fire. And then you just sit there helplessly. You can't do anything about it. I mean, after that scene, you just cannot wait for Cage to just kill every single one of those motherfuckers. And that's simple but effective writing. If you want an effective revenge flick, this is a great way to do it. And this is a prime example of how to do it the right way. It doesn't have to be overly complex. You don't have to pull out some stupid twist in the end where, oh, it wasn't a revenge movie after. No. Stick to your guns. Mandy sticks to its guns, and it blows a lot of his contemporaries out of the water as a result. So I'm trying to think of what else I could say about the film. I mean, the editing by Brett W. Bachman is also excellent. It's not egregious or anything. It's the film goes, like I said, I personally feel it goes by at a great pace. The structure it sets up, the different blocks and different chapters are really well situated. And there wasn't really a moment in the film where I was like, wow, the editing, that was bad. There was nothing like that in this movie. From a technical standpoint, the film gets nothing but aces all across the board. Already talked about the performances. They're all great. Every single one of them. And when it comes to any other elements, I'm trying to think of anything else. I would definitely be remiss if I didn't mention Johan Johansson's absolutely scintillating, spectacular score for this film, for Mandy. It fits the film tight and snug. It adds a lot of different bits of mood and atmosphere to multiple different sequences throughout the film. When there needs to be dread, it effectively adds dread. When there needs to be suspense, it helps add that. When there needs to be thrills, it adds that and then some. When it needs to have a little bit of badassery, it also delivers on that front. In particular, in the scene where Nicolas Cage's character Red Miller is building and creating his war axe, and there's a really badass epic bit of music that's created by Johan that's used in that scene that just makes that sequence even more badass. I mean, even calls the track "Forging the Beast," which is a perfect name for the track. This score is just a spectacular swan song for Johan Johansson, a supremely talented and terrific composer who created some very memorable and magnificent music that really did place him above a lot of composers today. He only had the opportunity to do very few scores, and the very few scores that he did, for the most part, they were all impressive. They were all just auditorially amazing. They were they were the type of score that I honestly loved hearing. I loved hearing this type of music. It's speaks to my soul and gives me chills when there needs to be chills, and gets my blood pumping when a score needs to get my blood pumping. And I always felt that he was a composer who was a rising star and one of the finest composers working today. And he still would be if he didn't let his own personal demons consume him. So it's a real shame that Johann is no longer with us. But I will say this, through films like Mandy and through his score for films like this, he'll never be forgotten, because he's left enough of an impact with his just immeasurable talent as a composer that, in a lot of ways, if you ask me, he will live forever. And there's a reason why Mandy was dedicated to Johann, and this is one hell of a score to go out on, and one hell of a high note. So, rest in peace, Johann, and thanks for all of the really spectacular scores that you composed over the years. The three elements that I look for out of a film that's good, let alone great, this film nails all of them. You have compelling, captivating, interesting, engaging characters. Check. You have a story that's interesting, that keeps you engaged, that isn't boring, that doesn't take really crazy turns that leave you confused. And it's unique enough that it feels like it's fresh or somewhat new. And then you have the direction. You got a director who really knows what he's doing, who gets the most out of his actors and out of his shots in the film. And you have a film that's, as a result, ultimately really entertaining. The entertainment factor is off the charts because it's not boring, because you get to like these characters and you want to go along the journey with them. The villains are equally as captivating as the main characters are. There are plenty of moments in the film that make you go, wow, that's fucking insane. The Cheddar Goblin, the cage rage at the end. And it just makes for a supremely satisfying experience. And yes, a masterpiece, a modern day masterpiece, because I can't think of a single thing about Mandy that I personally didn't feel worked, that I personally didn't like about the movie. And I can't recommend the film enough. So I don't know what else to say about Mandy, except if I were to rate it out of 5 stars, I would give it 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, 2 thumbs up. I really highly recommend you give it a watch sometime. Give it a chance, whether you check it out on streaming right now or if it's playing in a theater near you. Go see it in the theater, because if you can see it in the theater, do it, because this is a film that should be seen in the highest definition possible, because its visuals are that impressive. And I'm not joking. They are that impressive. And it's just everything I love about cinema. I mean, this is the type of movie that makes me fall in love with movies all over again. And it's always a pleasure, and it's always great to see that type of film. And it's always great to continue to see that type of movie. Films like Mandy give me hope for film going forward, that we're still not at a point where all hope is lost, that we can still progress forward, and we can have new genre classics, and we can have new films that are impressive in multiple different ways, but are still unique in their own way. And that is something that is just a joy to experience and a joy to see. So yeah, check it out. Even if it doesn't end up being your cup of tea, I still recommend you give it a chance at least. And I personally feel it's worth a watch at least once to anybody who is into film. Period, just for the cinematography and the direction and its visuals alone. But anyway, I don't know what else to say about Mandy. I've sung every single praise there is, I think anyway, for this movie, and I can't think of any more to praise about Mandy. But yeah, it's just one of those films that rarely comes along nowadays, and just visually stunning, impressive in multiple different instances. Just I just loved it. It was just such a wonderful film. So anyway, thanks for watching my review, and as always, I will see you later. See ya.